Welcome to Buckets. I'm your host, Brandon Anderson, here with my good friend Joe Delara, ready to bring you some basketball updates. All-Star break is in the past. We are pushing forward to the quote-unquote second half of the season, even though, Joe, it's 20, 25 games left. We
Yeah,
were well past the halfway mark.
like the last third.
Right, yeah, we're on the home stretch here. Playoffs are something like 50 days away, so we're coming close. Today we are going to be all about the play-in. So there's lots of times to talk about all the contenders. We will do plenty more of that here in Buckets on episodes to come. We had an article up this week at Action Network about the tanking teams. We'll have plenty of time to talk more about those teams. Today's about kind of the gooey middle, like those teams stuck somewhere right in the middle that we kind of don't talk a whole lot about all the time. So here's the concept for today. We are going to do a play-in draft. So Joe and I are going to go back and forth. We'll do 12 picks, 6 each. We're going to draft the team from either conference, just all smushed together, that we think is the most likely to make the play-in. So the first pick off the board will be the team of any team in the NBA that we think is most likely to be in the play-in, 7, 8, 9, or 10 seed all together. And then as we do each team, we'll talk about, okay, so where are the odds at right now on FanDuel, our sponsor? Are they a play-in team? Are they a playoff team? Do we like division odds? Do we think they can make a run? Just kind of any other associated bets, even to if there are awards that we think are correlated to them being in this range or anything like that. So just kind of want to talk about, the Atlantas and Minnesotas and Washingtons of the world a little bit. So yeah, that's the concept. Play-in odds are coming from our sponsor, FanDuel. Just for transparency for you, we are recording this during All-Star break. You'll be listening to it after a night of games have been played. So if the odds aren't quite exactly the same, that's why. But I think all this stuff should be pretty playable over this final stretch here. So, Joe, welcome to the show. You ready to talk about some middling teams?
Yeah, let's talk about that mushy middle.
That's right. Well, let's get into it. So you got the first pick here. So who of the entire NBA do you have as the most likely team to end up in the play-in?
So I right now the team that I think is most likely is the Washington Wizards. They are 28 and 30. They currently sit at ninth in the Eastern Conference. The odds right now they're a pretty heavy favorite. They're not the biggest favorite. I think that you might be going to them next, but they're minus 320 to make the East play-in tournament. Look, I just don't really see them falling a lot. And they also I don't think that they have the ceiling to, get to a 6 seed and like get out of the play-in. So just based on the way the East is structured, I think that they're like firmly entrenched in the 7 through 10 seed range here. And they have enough talent to not drop out. You've got Kuzma, and I'm saying Kuzma before Brad Beal because he's probably going to play more. And then you have Kispert. They traded Rui, but I think that this team's got enough there that they can, and obviously Porzingis. I think they have enough there that they can be, problematic for some, and I think they're going to stick around. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I had Washington second on my board. You said kind of the 7 to 10 range. I think the East 8 to 10 range for me is mostly locked in at this point. So we'll get to those other teams, but Washington I have at 9. So right in the middle of that locked in range. Yeah, they're not bad, right? Like DeLon Wright has been really good for them. It helped them a lot defensively. And so I think they've been better lately and better when he's in the lineup. They've missed a lot of Beal time. So that's kind of factored into the numbers, but there's a chance he plays a little more. I was on your podcast. We did All-Star draft, and I had Kristaps Porzingis as my last All-Star choice in the East.
Yeah.
He's been really good for them. And like Washington, not fun or exciting to talk about. They've been pretty good lately. Like last 15 games into the All-Star break, they were 5th in net rating, offensive 3rd, defense 14th. So they're playing basically like, that's better than a 500 team, but they're a couple games below. They're right in that range. So you mentioned their play-in odds. I don't really think it's worth it at such a juice number. I do have a bet here I'm looking at, though. And so this is going to tie into a couple of other teams. So maybe I'll mention the bet and then we'll circle back to it. But in the division, they are plus 1,300 to win the division. So nobody knows division. So basically, here's what that would mean: Washington versus Atlanta and Miami. And spoiler alert, I've got those teams as the 7 and 8 seeds, right ahead of Washington as the 9 seed. So it's a head-to-head bet between those three. Miami right now is 4 games up, and they are up 2-1 head-to-head on Washington. But let's come back to that because we're going to talk about Atlanta and Miami, I'm sure, at some point. But I think 13-1, I think it's too long of a number. So I'll go next because I'm going to actually just take one of those teams. So I'll take Atlanta, second pick, to make the play-in. And like you said, they are the favorite right now, the Hawks, to make the play-in out of either conference. They're at minus 420 right now. So something like in the 80% likely to make it. Honestly, I think that's probably a little low. So there's probably a slight value there, but just not really worth it to me. Yeah, I mean, the Hawks just seem gooey, middle-licious. Like they are all the stuff you said about Washington. Both Washington and Atlanta have fairly soft schedules. So that's one thing to look at here. For Atlanta, at the end of the season, they play Philly and Boston, which is going to show up as hard on the schedule, but might end up being resting teams where those teams are just kind of sitting it out for the playoffs. And the Hawks, too, with Atlanta, they're going to push. Like, they're going to go for every win. They're not trying to tank to get out of this. They think they're good, right? Like, they think they're a playoff team for sure. So I think for the Hawks, I noticed on their schedule, early March, they play in Miami 2 games in a row. So I think that kind of will dictate if they go to Miami and win both of those, well, they might win the division then, and they might have a chance to get up out of the play-in range. I think probably they don't, right? Because they're just not that good. So yeah, I think they probably split, maybe lose both of them. And if they don't win both, I think they're pretty much just stuck into the play-in at that point. So they're right around 500. I don't really need the division odds. I played it before the season, so I've still got some money in there. But I think the Hawks, they're just a very boring team to me, stuck right in the middle. How about for you?
Yeah, I kind of feel similarly. The only thing that I am considering with Atlanta just is that Trae Young really has played a lot better the last like couple months. He started off the season like pretty poorly. He's a name that we've been seeing him in the All-Star, game like recently, but I think that his play has gotten better as him and DeJounte Murray have kind of figured each other out a bit. So that's why I might be like a touch higher on Atlanta than you are. But either way, like I don't think that they're a contender per se this year. They just seem to have too many pieces that don't really like fit right. I think they're going to be in the play-in though.
What would you, if you were going to place a bet on Atlanta, would you rather bet them to make the play-in and just drink the juice and take the small profit? Or it sounds like you're high enough in Atlanta that you think they maybe would come out of the play-in. Would you look at Atlanta to make the playoff proper?
I think that it would depend on the matchup, honestly. Like, I think that because Atlanta is going to be, I have them closer to like the 7-8 part of the bracket as opposed to the 9-10. So like, I would probably just look at them and say like, all right, like, I probably just going to not play them. And then depending on who they play in that specific game, that might be the spot where I'm like, all right, like I'm just going to back them to win in this spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's key too. There's been a lot of conversation coming out of the trade deadline about how we can't just lump first round pick, quote unquote, all into the same thing. And I think we're starting to do that a little bit with the play-in also. Like just making the play-in, like that's the concept of the podcast today. So let's not poo-poo it too much. But being the 7 or 8 versus the 9 or 10 is a massive difference. Like every one of those spots is a huge difference. I think just, as the 7 seed to not make the playoffs, if you start as the 7, you have to lose 2 times at home in order to miss the playoffs after that, as probably the better team, right? You have to be the favorite and twice lose on your home court, which the odds of that are significantly different than being the 10 seed, where you have to win twice on the road just to get into the playoffs. And now you're the 8 seed on top of it, even if you do that to get in. So I think keep that in mind. If you're looking at, okay, I kind of like Atlanta. Well, do you like them enough to possibly be the 7 or 8 seed? Because that's going to matter not just to get into the play-in, but actually to get out of the play-in. So I think if you're betting beyond just playing odds, keep that in mind. Let's go to the third pick. Who's next on your board?
So this is honestly like this is a little bit of like a riskier pick, and I'm kind of getting into it right now. But like I think that the Brooklyn Nets are very likely to be in the play-in.
Wow.
Like I I don't like their offense, and you're getting great odds on this. And I know like we're trying to bring in the odds later, but you can get them at plus 250 to make the play-in. They have a 3-game lead in the loss column ahead of the Knicks and the Heat. I wouldn't be shocked if they were to fall below both of those teams. Just strictly based on the fact that I think that they have a lot of things to figure out. Their rotations are like really wonky right now because they've got about 12 guys that Jacques Vaughn has to figure out like who is playing, how do these guys all fit together? Like that's tough from a coaching perspective, I think, to get these guys like to not only play together but to play well together. So it's a little bit of a bet on the Knicks, and it's a little bit of a bet against Brooklyn here. I think that I like them to fall into the play-in, and see, because I think that Miami, as much as I hate on Miami, I think that Miami is good enough that they're going to not lose these bad games down the stretch. So I think that they're properly favored, probably realistically in the division, even though I think that you are kind of going to fade them a bit. But I just don't think, I think Brooklyn has a lot of pieces, but I just really struggle to see that meshing cohesively to finish out the season because I don't see enough scoring on this team right now.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think Brooklyn is obviously a hard one for obvious reasons because
Yeah.
we don't know what their team is. Like there's I
Yeah.
can't argue really against that or for that because we don't have the numbers yet. As much as any team in the NBA, we just have no template for what this team should be. I think an interesting thing about them. So once KD went out, they went 7-11, and obviously he never played again after that. They
Yeah.
were 27-13 before that. So they were a 55 win pace team up until that. That's not really relevant anymore, of course, because they don't have Durant and Kyrie. But I
Yeah.
think it's interesting to me. I'm a little higher on them than you are because the 7-11 stretch without KD, like they're not getting that back because KD's not
No.
there anymore. But I think like it's a really deep roster now. And I think they could really benefit just from the depth and stability that they will finally have after just like 60 games
Chaos.
of
Yeah.
tumultuous settings so far. So in their schedule, they have a tough March, but then a really easy closing stretch, I think. So, and like we know teams are going to want to push to get out of the play-in. So
I agree.
I think the reason for me, Brooklyn, I had far down my list. I had them 10th on my board. The reason for me is this: for Brooklyn to make the play-in, I think you only have one out because I don't think Brooklyn has any real chance to fall below the two teams we just talked about, Atlanta and Washington. They're so far ahead right now. They're 5, 6 games up on those. So now
Yeah.
it's just head to head. Brooklyn has to be worse than Miami by multiple games, and the Knicks and Brooklyn. Like Brooklyn has to be bad and Miami good and New York good. And it's like it kind of inadvertently is making a 3-way parlay for me.
Yeah. A little
That's my
bit.
only out. So I could see it. I think Brooklyn, their range of outcome is as big as any team in the East. Like
Yeah.
we'll get to the Pelicans, I'm sure, but they're maybe the Pelicans of the East, just in that we don't really
That's
know.
how they
Like,
feel. Yeah.
yeah, like they could be the 5 seed or fall aways. I think the problem is like they're 34-24 at the All-Star break. There are only 24 games left. So I don't think that they lack enough talent to be terrible, right? Like there's a
Yeah. I
lot of
just
good
think the
talent there. So if you're bad for 24 games, you still go like 10-14 and you're still a 44 win team and you're not in the play-in at that. Like you got to be really bad, I think, to
yeah.
fall down to this range.
I feel like I can just see them like the bottom just falling out just
Yeah.
because of the rotations. Like just because there's just too much like what do we do? Like they have so many guys and just like I think that everybody's gonna be like relatively like happy there. Like I don't think anybody's gonna be like upset about like what their role is just because like they know it's chaos. But I think that that makes it very difficult on like a nightly basis when they just there were so many games that Durant and Kyrie realistically bailed them out. Like at the end of the game, where Kyrie went crazy in the fourth quarter, or Durant just like had a Durant game, and they don't have that now. So I'm wondering, like, I think Jacques Vaughn is a good coach, but I'm wondering like if he can make this work without that like superior type of talent. And like for me, like I think that I can see the bottom kind of falling out
Yeah.
of it as these other teams kind of get it together a little bit more.
All right, I get that. All right, so I'm going to go fourth here, and this is interesting because I'm going to stay in the East. So
Okay.
theoretically, we are about to draft the four most likely playing teams, all from the East. There's only four spots, Joe. Remember, only four. So I think that tells us what we need to know about the state of the West, who I'm sure we'll get to. I'm basically taking chalk here. I'll take the Raptors. So
Yeah.
Toronto was third on my board. They're third in the odds right now to make the play in at FanDuel. They're at, well, they're second. They're tied with Washington at minus 320 as of recording. So Toronto basically tied with Washington in the standings. They've got one extra game played where they lost. So they're a team that has underperformed expectations, but that kind of is their thing, right? That's kind of what they do with
Yeah.
this weird collection of talent. They just are extremely a 500-ish team to me. Like they play a ton of close games that are coin flips. They've got a tougher schedule overall, but they do play, I think in the last week, they play Boston twice and Milwaukee. So that's again where the schedule is going to look hard, but might break their way where those teams maybe are resting by then. I think adding Jakob Pertl should help a lot to have like an actual real center. Sorry,
Yeah.
Precious Achua, somebody that will actually protect the rim and add some size and even just like structure the team a little bit in a way where they've lacked that at times. So yeah, I'm not high on Toronto. This is also implicitly for me a bet against Chicago, who would be the team most likely to, like, I have Toronto as a 10 seed. So in a way, I'm
Yeah.
doing the thing I just accused you of with Brooklyn. I'm going for one spot here. The difference is I feel fine betting against Chicago. And in this case, I think Toronto could very easily pass Washington or pass Atlanta, where I don't think those
Yeah.
teams can pass up the other direction, but could go down here. I think with Toronto, I'm not looking to bet this here. If I was going to play it, I wouldn't hate still a Toronto to miss the playoffs bet because I don't think I'm probably going to love them in a play-in setting,
No.
especially where I likely put them in that 9 or 10 games. So now Toronto, with their weird roster, has to win 2 times to get into the playoffs. I don't think I'm probably going to like that based on what I'm looking at here. Where are you at on Toronto?
I'm with you on that. Toronto is like one of those teams too, where Nurse obviously they're a well coached team, but they're very, very similar to the Knicks, in my opinion, in the way that they play their minutes. And I think that this Toronto team has really, I like that they picked up Pirtle just from like a depth perspective, but they, I feel like they just don't have that other gear like in them. So I don't like them to come out and win 2 games in the East, especially when, I think that at the end of the day, these other teams that are there are kind of good foils for them in a way.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's go to the 5th pick. And I'm curious to see if we are finally going to head west on your board. So you're up for pick number 5. Who you got?
So I'm going to take the Minnesota Timberwolves to be in the play-in. Look, they're 31-30. The West is like a disaster. Just like you are like literally like one day away from being the 4 seed or out of the playoffs right now. So entirely. But Minnesota, I think the defense is kind of regulated a bit. They've really kind of established themselves as like literally a 500 team. They're fine. Like they're not doing anything like exceptional. They're not really doing anything that bad either, and I think that the Conley trade I think was good for them. I think that the move to move D'Angelo Russell out and put Mike Conley in, he's a more of a true point guard. I think it should help not only Anthony Edwards, but whenever Karl Anthony Towns comes back, I think it should help that there's like a real point guard to facilitate here. Additionally, I don't look at Minnesota and I don't see them as a team that's really going to pass realistically the top 6 teams in the West. Like, I just don't think that they're better than them. So they're going to have some growing pains, I think, when Karl Anthony Towns comes back, and that might even cost them a game or two, just despite adding the talent back in there. So I don't think that they'll fall out. I don't see them dropping down to 11 just based on the structure of what's going on in the West, but I think that they're firmly in on the play-in, especially where they're standing right now.
Yeah, that's basically about how I have it on my Timberwolves, right? I
Yeah.
think they're still now that D'Lo is gone and we got Mike Conley in. I think we're back to my Timberwolves for a while. Yeah, this team played in the 7-8 play-in game last year and then blew up the franchise and traded everything to overhaul. And it sure seems like they're headed right back to that exact game
Yep.
this year, right? Like,
Yeah, it's exactly the same. I do think, though, I think I would take them to make the playoffs because I think I'd like them in this one game spot, just looking at what else is there, because I don't think Dallas falls out of it. Like, I don't think Dallas drops. So if you leave the top 6 intact, you have a matchup with maybe a Zionless Pelicans team. Who knows if the Warriors are going to be there? Like, honestly. And
yeah.
then, like, I don't know. Maybe, but they're
Yeah, no,
plus
I mean,
money.
I think especially the way the standings are right now, Minnesota, I think it sounds like both of us have them in that 7-8 game. Like I have Minnesota as
Yeah.
the 7 seed. And it's important again, as we talked about, because you might in that game, you might avoid the Warriors and Lakers in the first play-in. Like the
Yeah.
Warriors, we might get that Steph LeBron knockout game again, like we had a couple of years ago, but that might be 9 versus 10. And if you're the Timberwolves, you might be the 7-8 game against the Pelicans. And you're like, hey, man, we've been here and we can win this game. And now you don't have to worry about beating one of the teams that clearly should beat us right
Yeah.
now. So, yeah, I don't hate that. And I think that's where hopefully, if you're Minnesota, you hope that's where having Conley pays off for you. And
Yeah.
I would add Gobert, but it's the playoffs. So let's be honest about it. But I think
So we can
having
bet his
Conley's
unders.
leadership and like having the experience they had last year to win a knockout game setting like that.
Yeah.
I'm a little more tenuous on Dallas than you are. So for me, my West is I have like a 6 seed to 11 seed tier. That's all within a couple
Sure.
games of each other. But yeah, Minnesota would have been my second West choice. I'll go next with a team that I can't even believe this, but my top choice out of the West, my most likely West play-in team is the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay.
So Oklahoma City at FanDuel right now is plus 195 to make the play in. I've seen them closer to plus 240 out there. This is a bet for me. I'm going to bet on OKC to make the play in.
Yeah.
I don't need it beyond that. I don't need playoff odds. I don't need championship odds. Like, we're not going crazy here. But I think the Thunder are like legitimately a pretty quality 500-ish, pushing for the postseason sort of team. They still have 5 back-to-backs left. So the schedule, like they made the schedule assuming a tank here, right? So it's not going to help them a ton. But here's the thing I noticed. OKC has 4 games left against the Utah Jazz. That's all 4. You play teams up to 4 times in a season. That is a huge break in Oklahoma City's favor because Oklahoma City to start the year was terrible, right? If they played Utah the first 2 months of the season, they lose 3 or 4 of those games against the Jazz. The Jazz were smoking people. Teams haven't adjusted yet. OKC is bad. Now it flips. Now the Jazz traded away half of their key guys, and now Oklahoma City is playing well, and Shea is broken out, and Giddey is playing well, and the defense is getting good. You know, all the Jalen Williams are showing up now, right? So, like, just a totally random scheduling luck thing has now 4 of their last 23 against the Jazz. They go 3-1 or 4-0 in those games. You make the play in, and you might easily make the play in at that point. They have a long home stretch against a lot of similar teams to them, similarly in the standings. I mean, right out of the gates here. So they start Thursday. By the time you listen to this, they will have played that first Utah game Thursday night. I already bet on OKC in the app. The Thunder are an underdog right now as we record this. I don't think they should be. I think the Thunder are the better team than the Jazz right now. And they play 3 of their first 5 out of the All-Star break against them and another one later. So I think the Thunder are a team to me that right now books are sort of seem to be pricing as an afterthought. Like, oh, cute, right? Cute. The Thunder, they've won a few games and hung around. Last 15 games, they are 10th in net rating, and they are top 12 on offense and defense for the season. Sorry, that's not even last 15. That's 10th in net rating is for the season. Last 15 games, they are third in net rating. So I know it's a small sample, but third is really good, Joe. Like third is conference finals. They're not that, but they're playing really good basketball. I like them for the play-in. You can bet over under seeding at some books. There's an 11.5 seed. Under is juice positive or juice for plus money. I love that. I think this team is absolutely going to finish in the top 11 seeds. I did not expect to be here on the Thunder, Joe. Have I gone crazy on OKC?
No, because like I had them on my list too. Like I really like what they're doing, and defensively they've looked incredible, especially of late. And on the season, they're 10th in adjusted net rating. That's better than the Kings. That's better than the Suns. Like, and granted, like the Suns have missed some players throughout the season, but still, like they're 10th. That's insane. Like you don't think of them as that good, but like I think you're spot on with your analysis and the fact that books are just not pricing them properly. And the Jazz, especially because the Jazz like haven't had the fallout. Like it's never been like, oh, like they're bad all of a sudden. Like they've just been like, and we've talked about this on buckets. Like I feel like every so often we're just like the Jazz are just like a slow drip, and it's just like they're slowly running out of gas. Yeah. And now OKC gets the scheduling advantage realistically, where they're going to go play them 4 times still down the rest of the season, and they're one of the teams that they're trying to spread like a gap from. So I love them in this spot, and I think you're right in terms of the betting market. The number is just way too long.
Yeah, I mean, we hate to play the disrespect card, but I think OKC is getting disrespected in the way they're being priced right now, and we saw it too. Like at the break, they are the team with the best ATS record in the NBA. So they're a team you can continue to bet night to night and continue to bet futures on until books adjust, and they haven't adjusted yet. So
no,
yeah, they're a team to keep playing. We're halfway through. Let's go to pick number 7. Who is your next most likely to make the play-in?
So I am going to go with the Golden State Warriors, partially because I don't know. Like we know that they're going to keep resting Clay. We're not really sure what the deal with Curry's injury is. I think that they're going to wind up just being like stuck in this area. Like I think they're going to struggle to get out of the play-in either way, just because I think their floor has kind of risen a bit. Like Poole has gotten a little bit more comfortable running this team. And I think that there's enough there that they're going to not fall out of the bottom. But I do think that they're going to struggle to get like to their ceiling if they're really like, they're still continuing to rest Clay on back-to-backs. They're resting, like Curry's hurt again. You have to imagine that he misses. It's crazy. These guys get like a week off and they start with a back-to-back, but like he's not going to play one of those games probably.
Yeah.
So Golden State, like they are like very in this mindset of like, whatever, like we'll just be in the play. Like we don't care. Like we'll go beat you. Like it's fine. We're just going to rest our guys. And I think that that's bad for a multitude of reasons, like namely variance. But I think that they're just going to be stuck in this play-in range. And like if Curry comes back too late and they have to make a push to be in the play-in, then like great, like you're betting on you have the Warriors, like sure, like they should get there. And if it's the other way around and like they've created some sort of separation, I don't think that they care being in a 7-8 play-in spot, because they're just like, well, we're the Warriors, like we're gonna beat you in one game, like we'll run our death lineup against Rudy Gobert and just like destroy you right now. So I think that they're relatively complacent being in the play-in. And I think as long as they feel like they can be like, they probably would want to avoid Denver, but like, that's just, are you a 7-8 seed? And I think that that's enough for them. And if they fall out because Curry's injury is too bad or whatever, I think that they're good enough at the end of the season to just say like, all right, we're going to lock it down. Like we're going to not rest. Like we'll be fine. We'll come out of this in the 9-10 spot.
Yeah, it's a hard team to get a hang on. And we've talked a lot about the Warriors and we'll continue to. And it's like, I think we keep waiting for them to show us what they really are in one direction or another. And I wonder if they're just not going to. Like,
or is this literally what they are?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, they're literally 500 right now. Like I don't think that they are a 500 team any given night, but I think over 82 games, I think they're a 500 team, right? Like
Yeah.
there are two situations I don't trust this team on. Number one, Steph is out. Well, he's out. Number two, they're on the road. Well, sorry to break it to you, but half of your games are on the road. It's like that's a lot of games that I have to bank on the
Yeah.
Warriors finding a way with possibly no Steph for some and a whole bunch on the road. I don't know what to make of them. Here's my question. We're not going to do title odds with them because there will be plenty more Warriors title, et cetera, to come. If the Warriors don't make the play in, why? Is it because to you they made it out in a good way to the 6th seed, or is it because they missed? If you could bet on no play in over under, did they go over the play in and qualify directly to the postseason, or did they miss the whole thing?
I think they missed the whole thing. Like, I think it's like one or the other. Like, I don't think that they get out of it because I think that they'll dog it. Like, I don't think that Kerr will push this team to like get up for a 4 seed. Like, because they just don't care. Like, and like they've made it like abundantly clear that they just do not care about the regular season. And it's just like, well, like even when they went and got Gary Payton, they're just like, all right, well, we'll see you in a month, I guess. Like they know he's gonna be out for a month. And they're just like fine with it. So like I think that it's possible that they overplay their hand. And I think that really like the bet is probably the other way, like the other extreme, which is just
Yeah.
like they don't get healthy, they don't figure it out. But like I think that I cap them right now. Like I don't see them getting out of the play in on the upside. Like the
Yeah.
only way out, I think, is through the bottom.
Yeah, plus 245 to miss the postseason, or to not to miss the postseason, to miss the playoff proper. I think if you had to play something on the Warriors, that maybe actually is your number because you've got a lot of outs. You can miss the plane entirely. You can make it, but be the 9 or 10 and lose either of those two games. There just are a lot of ways out. Or, Steph just gets hurt for longer. And now you're just like, now it's free money at that point because we know how
Yeah.
that's going to go. So I think we all want the champion Warriors to make their push and make a run. I don't know. I think we're going to be waiting all season and suddenly be at the plane and be like, okay, is this the moment now? And I don't know if the moment is coming.
Yeah, I don't either. It's concerning.
All right, I'm going to do a boring next pick. I'm going to do a team that in a weird way is kind of the East version of the Warriors to me. I'll take the Miami Heat. They are my fourth team in the East to be in the play-in. I think we agree Atlanta, Washington, Toronto.
Yeah.
Miami is, to me, I think Miami is kind of locked in as the 7 seed. I was looking to see, is there a way to bet on Miami to literally be the 7 seed? I think in part because that Jimmy Butler attitude is like, we don't care. Yeah, we don't put us in the plan. We don't care. We'll win anyways. Oh, we got a face against Milwaukee in the first round. Bring on the Bucks. Bring on Giannis. I don't care. We'll play whoever. Like I don't think Miami is going to be intimidated or play their way out of a matchup. I don't think they're going to give a rip whether they're home or road, whether they're the 7 or the 8 seed or the 9 seed. Miami's just going to be like, if Atlanta, Washington, get out of here. We're going to flip the switch and beat you by 25 in a play-in game. And honestly, they're probably right. And Miami's going to make the playoffs. I just think, though, similar to the Warriors, like the Heat have all missed time. Everyone except for Bam has missed time, but that's not going to change. They're gonna wait until the playoffs and then hope that they can flip the switch there. They have a tough schedule. Next, like 10 games after the break is pretty tough, but then it's kind of a soft closing month. But I worry on their behalf that I kind of like Brooklyn still. I like New York a lot more than I expected.
Yeah.
I think they might kind of be stuck. Like, how Memphis is just stuck as the 2 seed and they can't really move up or down. I think Miami kind of might end up with a bit of a buffer where they're just like, yeah, okay, I guess why bother pushing toward the end here? Our guys are all old and broken. We're not going to get to the 6 seed. So we may as well just kind of coast into the 7 here. So let me come back to the bet that I mentioned before then. Right now, Miami into the All-Star break is 32-27. The Wizards are 28-30. Atlanta is in the middle, 29-30. So those records are probably slightly off, including Thursday games. Washington plus 1,300 to win the division. Washington has lost 2 of 3 against Miami, so they'd have to beat Miami in the one remaining game to tie the tiebreaker. I just think the Washington's competency puts them in play at a better than 13-1 price there. Like I project Atlanta, Washington to finish exactly at 500 and Miami to be at 43 or 44 wins instead of 41. I think if it's that close, couldn't Butler miss 3 weeks? Couldn't Washington win a couple of weird close games? And suddenly now, like, we might be within a game on a 13-1 ticket the last week of the season. What do you think about 13-1 Washington on that logic?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Like, I think this is an interesting, like, it's like our exercise that we're doing right now for the pod is interesting because, like, we're putting teams like in what we think. But, like, I think from an actionable perspective, that extreme outcome is way more likely than the odds like make it seem, especially with the spacing between these teams. Like I think, like I kind of think that it's more likely that Brooklyn falls below Miami than maybe like Washington taking over Miami, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like I do think that that's our cap of it. Like that, like your cap is one way and mine's the other way. So like, but that's fine. So I do think like if you believe in like the narrative that you have, then like the Wizards bet makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you can get Miami to be the 7 seed at plus, like, you know, there's some plus numbers out there. Like they're not the favorite to be the 7 seed.
Yeah, and Miami to make the play in right now is plus 150. That's probably a lean for me. I don't think I need to go, like, I like the OKC bet much better, but like I have them solely in at that 7 seed. I do think that they, similar to the Warriors question I asked you, if Miami is not in the play in, why? Certainly it's because up, right? Like because Miami earned their way out of it. They're not going to fall all the way out the other side, but I don't mind the plus 150. So we are technically 8 picks in. We should have our full play in, but we have selected 5 Eastern teams and only 3 in the West. Who's your next pick? Is it somebody from the West still?
Yeah, so it's going to be the Los Angeles Lakers. I like the Lakers to make the play in. I think that they got significantly better at the trade deadline. Like that, to me, the moves that they made, I think were much needed. And honestly, like I know that Lakers fans probably wanted Kyrie, LeBron wanted Kyrie. The moves that they made, I think, were better in the aggregate because they just didn't have enough NBA players like on that roster. Like they have like real players, and I think that LeBron can bring out what they actually needed from D'Lo, like the shooting. He can take off a little bit of facilitating, and he's better. He's just better than Russell Westbrook, like especially at this point in his career, in my opinion. Malik Beasley can go get a bucket. He's a great 3-point shooter. And then you added guys like Rui Hachimura, and then you added Mo Bamba. So like you added some like real pieces to this Lakers team. But on the flip side, it's a little bit more about what I'm seeing from these other teams in the West. Namely, I think the Jazz are going to fall out. I think the Jazz, like we talked about with the Thunder, I think the Jazz are going to they're going to wind up getting swept maybe by OKC. And that's 4 losses, which in the West, you really can't make up right now. Like that's just too big of a gap. The Blazers, Anthony Simons just got hurt. So they're going to be dealing with that injury. And I wonder to what extent, you know, they're going to be able to survive as a team that didn't really make moves at the deadline. Then looking at the Warriors, it's possible maybe the Warriors fall out. Who knows? But then the team that I'm really concerned about in the West is the New Orleans Pelicans. That team does not look good right now without Zion. They're saying Zion's going to be missing more weeks. Like, who knows with them, honestly? And if they get to a point where they start really falling out and they start really like dropping a lot of games and they start kind of falling out of the Western Conference picture, you have to ask the question, do they shut Zion down again and just say, what? We're going to wrap it up again this year. Like, that's it. Like, we don't know what else to do here. We got to retool. We don't want to be trying to come out of the West in like a double play-in type of game where Zion's health is like still a little bit in the air. And then you got to go play the Nuggets? Like, you're going to get crushed there. So I think that's why I like the Lakers. And I know that they're 2 games out in the loss column from OKC, 3, kind of depending on where you're at, but they still have a lot of games to play. And I think that that actually is beneficial for LA as opposed to some of these other teams.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've done a lot of Lakers. The Lakers are tough
Yeah.
because when I initially was prepping for second half of the season, my initial numbers had the Lakers finishing as the 13th seed, like finishing even behind Utah and Portland. And I've dug more into it, and I have the Lakers ahead of them now, but they still finish as the 11th seed for me. And I think too, we didn't say this, but with Oklahoma City is relevant here because if we're right that they are being undervalued by the books, I think Oklahoma City is being written off like they're not really in the mix of things. If they actually, I have them as my most likely play-in team. I think they're being treated as a non-threat. So that's a difference of 4 spots versus 3. And I think the Lakers or Warriors are more likely to get squeezed out of that missing spot if that's the case. Like, an irrelevant Thunder team might end up stealing a spot from a team that Lakers and Warriors that still could be a legitimate title contender if they get in and get out of the play-in. So a thing with the Lakers, I agree with the stuff you said, like clearly much better now. They got to go 14-9 after the break just to get to 500. And they might need to do that just to make the play-in, like just to make the 9 or 10 seed. You might need 41 wins. I think you're going to need at least 40. So you got to go at least 13-10. That doesn't sound like much. They're 5 games below 500. Like that is not an easy ask for this team, even an improved team. And I think that's interesting too. End of the season schedule. 2 of their last 3 games are Clippers and Suns. For most teams in the NBA, I'd be like, what a great outcome that is. Clippers and Suns might just be resting by then. I don't think the Clippers and Suns are resting. If LeBron is like, I just need to win one more game to make the play-in, I don't think the Clippers across the town in crypto, the Clippers are not going to be like, oh, you know what? Let's just take the night off. Go ahead, LeBron. Free win for you, buddy. Congratulations. All-time winning scorer. Have a free one on us. Like, no, the Clippers are going to be like, we can end the Lakers season. Game on. Let's go. And the Suns, Kevin Durant, like the Suns, those teams could be playing to possibly knock out an opponent they might have to face in the first round otherwise, right? So I think it's interesting because, and even like Utah plays 2 of the last 4 against the Lakers. I think the Jazz, even if they're basically tanking at that point, which I think they will be, I think the Jazz try to win those games. You want to be the team that knocks out LeBron and the Lakers. Like that is the feather in your cap heading into the off season. And I think that actually could end up hurting LA when I think it's going to be close down to the wire for them.
Yeah. So like, I think that's definitely a concern, but I do think that like looking at their schedule, they're kind of getting a break because I don't imagine Curry plays on Thursday. So So like, granted, like this is coming out after that game. If the Lakers win that game, that's huge, I think, for this conversation. Like whichever team wins that game, because they play again on March 5th. So that's, those 2 games, they could be dramatically different in terms of personnel that's out on the court. But I mean, I do like the fact that for LA, I think the end of season schedule for them, in theory, could be kind of soft with 2 games against the Bulls, a game against the Rockets. I know, like, from the motivational perspective, the Jazz might get up for this, but like maybe they just don't, or they just don't care. And then you have 2 games against the Jazz, and then maybe a game against the Clippers, game against the Suns, where they're just like, well, like, whatever, like, we don't want you in here, but like, whatever, like, what are we going to do? So, but it does kind of cut both ways, but I do like, you have to like 2 games against the Bulls in March. Like late March.
You can't feel too terrible about it. Let me help me out if I got the history right on this one. If I remember right, Kobe's last game, the 60 that he dropped heading to retirement, if I remember right, came on the final day against the Utah Jazz, who needed to win to make the playoffs while the Lakers were out, and the Lakers won and ended Utah's season. I believe they
I think you're
maybe
right.
already, I think someone else already knocked them out like during the game. So the result ended up not mattering. But I don't know if that's a thing, Utah could a few years later get revenge for the Kobe game and do them a favor and knock them back out. Am I
I
right?
think
Was
you're
it Jazz? Is that right?
it was the Jazz. I think you're right because I think it was one of those like Kobe was like the game mattered. Like he like said something about like to that effect too.
Yeah.
Like it's like it was a playoff game for them or like something,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like something like that.
I just
So
I'll call it now. That's the story. Final game of the season. Utah is going to get their revenge for Kobe years later. They're going to do it for Gordon Hayward. All
oh
right.
man.
My next pick, I'm going to take the Pelicans. I don't have too much to say. You kind of covered why the Pelicans are in this range. I don't feel great about it. They're a very high variance team that we just don't really know. I don't hate the schedule. They probably are missing Zion for a couple of weeks still. It's kind of winnable for a while. And then here's what I like. The only thing I like, especially about them, right in the middle of March, they have a week where they play Houston, Spurs, Hornets. That is, you cannot make a better 4-game stretch. And that should be right about when Zion would come back. So, like,
Yeah.
if you can just barely stay above water and get a couple of wins without Zion, get to that week and beat the teams that want to lose, and then you get through it and you're like, all right, we're like 3 weeks out, we're in range, Zion's back. For me, I still have them to play in because of that reason, but it's a soft play, and I'm not betting this team in any direction right now because I have no idea what they are.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I yeah, there's not a lot to say about them at this point. It's just
Yeah.
like I grabbed them before to miss the playoffs, but then the Zion news broke. So there's not really anything actionable at this point on them, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so. All right. I said 12 picks. We're a little long here. Let's do one more round here. So one last pick for each of us on a team most likely to make the play. And if I've done the math right, I think that we each have still another West team maybe that we think would still make it. So give me one final
Yeah.
pick that you've got to come into the play in.
It's uncomfortable because I just talked so much crap about them, but like the Blazers, I think you just have to consider it just because realistically, just because they have Damian Lillard. Like they if they have him, I think that they can win enough of these close games because their offense is still really good. They're fifth in adjusted net rating on the offensive side. I think a lot of it will depend, obviously, on how Anthony Simon's health is. Jeremy Grant missed a bunch of games too. I think that they're not too far out because they're tied with a lot of teams in the loss column with 30 losses. So they still have some games to play. I think they could make it up, but I'm not jumping at the opportunity to bet on the Blazers. I'll tell you that.
Do you have them in your play in? Like, are they one of your 4 right now?
No, I don't believe so. I think, what did I say?
Yeah.
Are they? I'm losing it now.
No, I think because you have the Warriors and Lakers higher, I think you must have the Blazers out by a spot.
I have the Blazers out, like realistically. Yeah, I have the Blazers out.
Yeah, I'm about the same page as you. I have the Blazers in about the same spot as well. They have kind of a soft schedule for a while, and then they have a stretch. Here's the stretch that they get to right near the end of the season: Thunder, Pelicans, Kings twice in a row, Timberwolves, Grizzlies. Like,
yeah,
they're going to be in the race all the way because they're going to push while Dame is there, and while Dame is healthy and playing like he is right now, they can win any one of those games. They're just not going to win all of them or close to it. So they feel to me like extreme. Like, if I could bet on Portland to finish in the 9 to 12 seed range, like, give me that bet. They'll be right on the cusp. And then even if they get in, I can't trust. I certainly don't want to bet them to make the playoffs, and the odds kind of reflect that accordingly.
Yeah. And Dame like already had his month where he was like the greatest player on the planet. Like I feel like he does that every so often. Like every year there's like a month in the middle of the season that doesn't matter like at all. And Dame just is averaging like 45 points a game. And like I feel like it already happened. Like so I struggle to see him doing that, throughout the rest of the year.
All right, I'll make a final pick here. I will also come from the West. So my 4 play-in teams we've already done already. This is a team that I have as the 6th seed that I think you have as a 6th seed too. The difference is my 6th seed is closer to the play-in race. I'm going to take the Mavericks here, and I think they are a real threat to make the play-in. At FanDuel right now, their odds are plus 230 to make the play-in. I've seen as high as a plus 350 out there. That's at least like a half unit bet for me. So here's the case. Dallas has already played 60 games, which is about as much as anyone. The reason that matters is because you only have 22 games left. Like, I know we got Kyrie now, and hooray, we figured out the team. There's just not as many games. Some of these other teams have 25 games left. So they're kind of already a little more stuck in place. And I just feel like if I'm looking at range of outcomes, the whole thing with the Kyrie trade is I feel like the bottom side outcome, there are a lot more bad versions here where Kyrie or Luka gets hurt or Kyrie does whatever Kyrie does and he doesn't play or they don't mesh well, or like there just are a lot of reasons why I could see this going poorly. I don't think that they have like a high ceiling push in them. I think they're being too optimistically priced right now. Like, I think they're being priced like they're in the 3 to 6 seed range. And I don't think they are. I think they're in the 6 to 11 seed range. Like, I think they're in the next group down of, I think they belong on this podcast. There's a reason we didn't talk about the Suns and the Clippers and the Kings. I don't think the Kings belong in this podcast, Joe. We didn't talk about them for a reason. I think the Mavericks are part of this conversation. Their over under right now is 45 and a half. They have 31 wins at the break. They have to go 15 and 7 to hit the over. That's a crazy number to me. And I know like they've got kind of a soft schedule. They've got a lot of home games coming up. They go Kings, Bulls, Spurs to close. So that's an argument against the play-in. That's why ultimately they kind of fell in my rankings a little bit, because I think once you get to that stretch, you just win those last three and you're probably okay. But I think they're a little overrated here. I would look at like a Grizzlies to win the division. To me, it's a very, like, you're paying for it. You're paying like a minus 400, but Dallas is not catching the Grizzlies. The Pelicans are not catching the Grizzlies. Like that's a a good one to kind of add into a parlay or something. I don't want Dallas to miss the playoffs. I looked at that number, but I can't get there because I think even if they make the play-in, you still have maybe the two best players on the court in any given matchup. Certainly the best one. You're probably the 7 seed. You get 2 home games. Like, I don't think they fall out entirely without the Luka injury, but I'll take the play-in odds. And I like that under 45 and a half. I think that's a terrible number.
Yeah, I'm with you on that under. I think that that's a good spot, especially because like we know that they're still kind of going through a little bit of growing pains. Like, it looks like Kyrie and Luka seem to have like decent rapport with each other at least. But they definitely have some things to work on. So I like that under. And I agree. Like, I don't see them really ascending the standings, if that makes sense. Like, I think 6, maybe 5 is their cap, but like I don't really see them going much higher than where they're currently situated.
All right, so let's summarize here a little bit for listeners. I'm gonna have you give out if you have any best bet. We talked about a lot of different bets along the way here. So while you're brainstorming for a second, I think my favorite one is that Thunder to make the play-in. I like them at plus 190. I think you can get it closer to a plus 240 if you shop around out there. That'd be my best bet. They are literally my most likely play-in team in the West. And then the other two that I like the most, that Mavs under 45 and a half we just talked about. I like that one. And I'll sprinkle that Washington 13-1 division. I think it's, very unlikely to hit, but I don't think it's 13-1 unlikely. So that would probably be my 3 biggest takeaways here. Do you have any best bets from this episode before we wrap up?
So I do like, honestly, I like that Nets play, the Nets to be in the play-in. You can get that. I know that you're asking for a couple different things. I don't think that they fall below 7. So if you can get that as an option, like if you can bet them to be exactly the 7 seed, I think that may have more value per se. But I do think that at, a plus 250, plus 300 type of number, shop around. But for them to be in the play-in, I think it's interesting for a team that really could see the bottom maybe fall out. And then in the West, I think that Minnesota should stick around in that spot, like in the top half of the play-in bracket. So I like them. You can get a plus 154 on them to make the playoffs. I think that with their history, I like that. And if you don't like the individual matchup, you can probably hedge out of it with a plus 154 number, especially with the fact that they're going to be playing realistically the way I have it capped. They would probably be playing 2 games. So you can always wait and do it on a different basis, or maybe even win twice. So I like the Wolves to make the playoffs at plus 154.
All right. Well, I like it. And for all our listeners who are always like, we never talk about the Wizards or the Hawks or the Pelicans or the Thunder. This was your episode, baby. You got all the gooey middle teams that you could ever want out of this. So this one was for you. All the play and talk that you need. We'll, I'm sure, be looking at all these teams even more as the races shape up. But that's going to wrap it up for today. And we obviously will be back next week once we're here in our regular stretch of games, all the usual episodes that you've come used to, all of our picks day to day, and I'm sure even more as we head toward the playoffs here. So that is it for today, and we'll see you next week. Let's get buckets.